Hello, my name is Nisha, and today's video is not going to be a hair video. I am going to discuss how my grandpa time storytelling clock works. The first thing that I'm going to explain is what the flashing end screen means. It is typically going to mean one of two things. The first is the simplest explanation. It just means that the cassette that's inside of it has cycled through the end of the tape and needs to be flipped over. That is the best sign. Unfortunately, the second thing that it can mean is that there is an issue with the grandpa time clock itself. You will get this screen if the tape inside the cassette malfunctions and is going haywire inside the cassette player. You will also get this screen if the grandpa time needs repair. The next thing I'm going to explain is the analog clock face compared to the digital clock. Both of them work, so when the clock is plugged in, the face of the clock will keep real time. However, it is not automatically synchronized with the digital clock. So if you do want it to keep real time, then you do have to manually set that from the back. Here I inserted an example of how I am going to synchronize the analog clock face to the digital clock that's keeping time. On the back, there is a black dial that can be turned to the left or the right by putting pressure with your finger and turning the face. So here I am just going to show you as I turn it from the back, I can synchronize it to whatever time is displayed on the analog clock. Now I'm going to flip back to my original demonstration and explain that the purpose of the grandpa time is to set up a routine for the child to go to sleep and wake up. So before we get started, I'm just going to open up the tape deck, flip the tape over, and stop the end screen. Now anytime the grandpa time is unplugged and plugged back in, it's always going to default to 12 p.m. and it has to be reset. But as we get into resetting each of the features, I'm going to explain how each of the icons and features work. The first feature is the light bulb icon, which is simply the night light. The second one is the story time icon, which tells a story. The 3 Z's are the bedtime routine, and the little bell icon is the alarm clock for the morning. Once I open the home start compartment, there are 4 buttons. All the way to the left is the set button, the second button points left, the third button points right, and the fourth button all the way to the right says select. If I press the set button once, the time of day for the child to wake up appears. The time of day does always default to 7 a.m. but I can press the left arrow or the right arrow to change the time of day to any time that I want those morning alerts to start. Pressing the set button a second time will cause the nighttime routine icon to appear. It always defaults to 9 p.m. Just like with the morning alert time, I can choose the left arrow or the right arrow to set the time of evening or night I want the nighttime routine to start. And what will happen is, whatever time is set for the nighttime routine, alerts will begin about 30 minutes before the child goes to bed to prepare them to get ready for bed. Once I press the set button a third time, the icon appears for real time of day. 30 minutes before whatever time was set on the nighttime routine icon is when nighttime alerts will start. And whatever time was set for the alarm icon is when morning alerts will start. So I'm just going to show you how I set any given time. So this can be used for the real clock, nighttime alerts, or the morning alarm. And so when I press the arrow and hold it down for 3 to 5 seconds, it'll start moving up or down in increments of 10, just depending on which arrow I am pressing. So I'm going to set up the time for real time of day, and then I will allow the clock to cycle through to show you how it works. So in this particular example, I set the time for 8:55 is for time of day. And then I'm going to set the nighttime routine for 9:15. And so it is going to show the lights out or time to go to bed alert, and then it's going to cycle into the bedtime story. After that cycles through, I'm going to allow one full cycle of the waking up in the morning and then going to sleep the next day to go through one more time so that you can see the full sequence of how this works. Now with the select button all the way to the right, all of the features are selected: alarm clock, nighttime routine, story time, and nightlight. So all of those features are going to cycle through.
It's time to brush your teeth. Bedtime in a few minutes.
Now once the time reaches whatever time was set for the nighttime alerts, the nightlight will flick on if the nightlight icon is pressed, and he will tell the child to go to sleep.
Time's up. You should be in bed. Lights out.
As long as the storybook feature is set, then he will also begin reading a bedtime story 1 minute later. And let me just show you the night light and how the face makes him look like Grandpa Time when the light is turned off.
Are you ready for a story? Now let me think. Oh yeah, how about the story of Puss in Boots? A long, long time ago, a miller lived with his 3 sons. He was a good father, and when he died, he left them everything he owned, which wasn't as much as he would have liked to. The first son, of course, got the mill, and his second son got his workhorse. But for his youngest son, all that was left was his cat. Well, cats are very nice pets, you know, but this cat seemed, well, I don't know, kind of restless. So one day the cat said to his master, "Give me a pair of boots and a gunny sack, and you'll find out how useful I can be." Well, you can imagine how surprised the young man was to hear his cat talk. But he said, "Okay, here you are, Puss in Boots," which is how the cat got his name. So Puss in Boots went right into the forest and caught a rabbit. And you know what he did? He put it in the sack and took it right to the king's palace. "Please accept this token from my master, the Marquis of Balaban," he said to the king. Well, the king had never heard of the Marquis of Balaban, but after receiving many gifts from him, all delivered by Puss in Boots, the name became very familiar. Of course, the miller's son had no idea that Puss in Boots was giving gifts to the king, or that he was calling his master the Marquis of Balaban. Well, one day, the clever cat was at the castle, and he heard that that very day, the king and his beautiful daughter planned to take a drive in the countryside. As you might have imagined, this was the chance Puss in Boots was waiting for. He raced home and he told his master, "Hurry, you must go bathe in the river, and I will make you a wealthy man." The miller's son had long ago given up trying to figure out his strange pet, so he simply went to the river and did what he was told. Now, as soon as he jumped into the water, the cat took his clothes and, believe it or not, he threw them in the river. "What are you doing?" screamed his master. But Puss didn't answer. He just very intently watched the road. When he saw the king's carriage come along, he raced out into the middle of the road, and guess what he did? He hollered at the king, "Help! Help! My master, the Marquis of Balaban, is drowning. Please, can you save him?" Well, by this time the king knew the name well, and naturally he made sure that this man who'd given him so many gifts would be saved. Then the king asked that his coachman find some dry clothes for the Marquis. When the miller's son reappeared, dressed in the dry clothing, he looked so handsome that the king's daughter fell madly in love. Well, you know how that can be. She wanted to make sure he wouldn't leave. "Oh, father, can the Marquis of Balaban ride with us?" she asked. "Of course," said the king, and he asked Puss to ride with them too. Now that was a very nice thing for a king to do, to ask a cat to ride with him. Anyway, Puss said that he couldn't, and he went running on ahead of the carriage. You see, Puss had a plan. As he ran along, every time he saw someone at work in the fields, he said to them, "If the king comes by and asks who owns this land, say it belongs to the Marquis of Balaban." So that as the king drove along, whenever he asked whose land this was, he was told it belonged to the Marquis of Balaban. And he believed it because, well, why shouldn't he? That Marquis of Balaban, thought the king, must be a very wealthy man. Now there's more to this story, but I'll stop here for now.
Now, some of the stories that are told are two parts, and when that happens, that is what the clock does. It'll pause it and let the child know that more will come the next night. Also, most of the stories are about 5 minutes. Now, this portion of the demonstration will show how the clock cycles through the morning routine. The time does not have to be reset every day, but I think like when I was making this demonstration, I accidentally unplugged it, so I had to do it over again. So I'm just setting the clock to think that morning is coming so I can show you the morning alerts.
Rise and shine, sun's up, hurry and flap on out of bed.
As soon as the clock reaches whatever time was set for the alarm, as long as that alarm icon is selected in that select feature, then the alarm will give the child an alert as soon as that time is reached in the morning. 5 minutes after that, it will give the child a warning that they should be up by now. And then 1 minute after that, the alarm will actually go off.
By now you should be up and strutting around.
Now, if you're looking at the grandpa time, the button all the way to the left is the night light button that turns the night light on and off. The button to the right of that is the alarm icon with a strike through it. At any time, the child can press the button that has the alarm icon with the strike through it, and that will stop the alerts. If they don't stop the alerts, then it will cycle all the way through to the alarm. Alright, so here's still the same day and evening, but I am just setting the clock to 8:30 so that it will finish Puss in Boots after the daytime alerts went off.
Are your things put away? Don't forget to get your pajamas on. It's just a little while to bedtime. You have only a few minutes left to brush your teeth. Are you all snug in your bed now? Now what story shall I... Oh, wait! Last time I was telling you about Puss in Boots. I'll finish that one now. Now let's see. If you remember, Puss in Boots had promised to make his master, who was a miller's son, into a wealthy man. So Puss had begun by taking presents to the king and saying they were from his master, the Marquis of Balaban, the miller's son to you and me. But Puss convinced the king with his gifts that the Marquis was indeed a wealthy man. Then Puss found out that the king was going on a drive with his daughter and told his master to go out for a swim in the river. When the king's carriage passed by, Puss hollered out that his master was drowning. The king saved the miller's son and took him along in the carriage because his daughter had liked him so much. Now then, while the carriage was rolling along, Puss in Boots had run ahead and come upon a huge castle that he knew belonged to an evil sorcerer. But Puss wasn't afraid, and he walked right up to the sorcerer and said, "I suppose you can turn yourself into any animal you want. Well, I don't believe it." The sorcerer grinned his evilest grin at Puss and immediately turned himself into a lion. Can you imagine that? Well, Puss wasn't even slightly afraid, even though the lion roared and bared his teeth and looked very nasty. "See," he said, when he turned back into a sorcerer, "now you must believe me." "Oh, sure," said Puss in Boots. "I believe you can turn into some big, mean animal like a lion, but I bet you can't become something so very much smaller than yourself, like a mouse." Well, as you probably already know about sorcerers, they are very vain and prideful. And this sorcerer was not about to be doubted by a pussycat with boots on. So he changed himself quickly into a mouse, and just as quickly Puss jumped on him and ate him all up. So much for the sorcerer. Suddenly, and this was a big surprise, Puss in Boots became a hero. All the servants cheered and danced about with glee, saying, "We are free of that evil sorcerer. You have freed us." Well, everybody likes to be a hero, don't you? Yes, but this was not what Puss cared about. He was glad to tell them all, "Your new master is kind and will be good to you." It's easy to see how the servants would want a kind man for master. So when the king's carriage finally arrived at the castle, who do you think was at the drawbridge waiting with all the servants? Puss in Boots, of course. "Welcome, welcome," he said, and he swooped low in a big bow. "You have arrived at the castle of my master, the Marquis of Balaban." As you can imagine, the miller's son was totally confused by the entire day and couldn't say anything, which was good, because very soon after, while the king and his daughter were being helped from the carriage, Puss in Boots got to tell his master what he was up to. "The Marquis of Balaban," thought the king, "is a very powerful man, and also a very nice man. He shall have the hand of my daughter in marriage." And so, the miller's son became a prince and lived in the old sorcerer's castle with his princess, and, of course, Puss in Boots lived there too. So you see, although pride can be a good thing, it can also get in the way and make people foolish.
So that is how the Grandpa Time storytelling clock works. The version that I showed at the beginning, the aged yellow stained one that was aged from time, is the original one that I received the Christmas that I was in kindergarten. The one that I used in the demonstration I bought about 10 years ago, refurbished from Toys That Talk. And I have to laugh because when I found out that I was pregnant with my daughter and I set up her nursery, the first thing I put in there was this Grandpa Time so that she could enjoy it as much as I did when I was a kid. And when I tell you she loves it as much as I did, it's like being 5 years old again every night when I hear her go through her nighttime routine, and every morning when I hear her wake up to it. So that's the video for this week. I do plan on posting some more of the Grandpa Time stories and routines. I have seen other videos of Grandpa Times, but a lot of them aren't fully functioning ones like the one that I have, so I do plan on adding a few more of the routines onto my page. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe.